What's poppin', This is the Dr. Greenthumb Podcast. I'm Dr. Greenthumb, a.k.a. Be Real, here with my special guest, Tom Green.
All right. Be real. Thank you.
Yeah. I got my co-host, E-Zone and C-.
What's up, hey?
We're just going to start chopping it up like some good weed right now. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on the show. I've been quarantining here in LA and just getting through this crazy pandemic. How are you guys doing?
Same thing, man. Just trying to stay safe, and yet be creative at home like yourself. But you've had the head start on all of us. I mean, this is something you've been doing from home for a very long time. And so I guess, because you took a little bit of time off, you were on the road doing things, this particular thing brought you back home. But, how quick was it for you to get back on that creative, on your creative game, being quarantined at home?
Yeah, well, I was sitting in the house and I've been wanting to start my podcast up again. So I started my podcast up again, and I was going through my, I got a bunch of old cameras from the old Webovision show. I called it Webovision back in the day, and way back in 2007. Like way back in 2007. It's funny that seems like a long time ago now, right? Like anytime you add 2000 to something, it doesn't seem like that long ago to me, but it actually is like 15 years ago. I built this TV studio in my living room here. And, I started touring, doing a lot of stand-up the last 10 years. And I haven't been doing the web show as much, but now that I'm stuck in my house, I'm firing it back up, and it's going good. I've been doing a show every day. Having a lot of weird guests. And you're gonna call in too, right? Be Real. That's gonna be fun. We're gonna talk about the early days of Cypress Hill. Yeah,
absolutely.
That'll be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a must.
Yeah, it'll be great. So it's been fun. I'm plugging in all these cameras and microphones, and I've got my drum machine plugged in, and I don't know if you can hear that, but it's a good time.
And in doing the Green Talks with you a week ago, I noticed that you did have your studio set up, and you've been doing a lot of work with the drum machine yeah.
Yeah, I got my, there you go. Can you hear that? I just made that the other night. It's a MPC, it's the MPC X, so it's like the reissued version of the classic MPC. And, I use Pro Tools, and I've got some keyboards. I've got a Moog keyboard and a Korg keyboard and lots of loops and things like that. But yeah, I started making beats back when I was a teenager back in the 80s, late 80s, and but the equipment now has gotten a lot easier. It really communicates with all the stuff, talks to each other so much better, and it's a lot of fun. So part of the thing that I've been doing in this quarantine is just trying to figure it all out at a higher level than I was at, with Pro Tools and stuff. It's a complicated program. I'm getting in there trying to figure out a little bit better with the mixing and the mastering and all that stuff. So it's been dope, man. It's been dope.
That's right. I wonder how many people actually knew you were producing like that since you were that young. Aside from your inner circle, your friends and stuff like that, has anyone ever come to you for any beats?
No, not really. I mean, I basically I was just made the beats for myself, for goofy songs that I was doing for my show or whatever. But back in the day when we had a rap group in Canada and we made beats, I never actually really produced anybody else. But I'm starting to think that would be kind of fun actually to do and because I'm really getting into the mixing, and I got some beats, man. I'll send you some beats. Be Real. Yeah, absolutely, man. I got beats.
On some Tom Green beats. I'm trying to tell you. I know.
Oh my God.
I'm a hip hop fan. I know that about you. You listen to a lot of different music, but I know you're a hip hop fan, and because anyone who makes beats on an MPC is a fucking hip hop fan. Because I mean, that's some of the most iconic drums came from a version of that machine there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got great sounds, and then it's also just got that swing setting pattern that really gives it that hip hop bounce to it. And then there's a lot of ways you can chop up a sample in there, which, you guys do better than anybody ever in history. But this is something I'm trying to learn to do, where you take a loop and you go in and you can actually set little chop points within the loop and really sort of, fuck with the actual, sounds of whether you're sampling a jazz break or I'm telling your audience this. And I know your audience knows too, but I'm just trying to say that I'm trying to figure out how to make beats like Cypress Hill. That's sort of always been kind of the dream, when I was a kid, was like, man, I wish I could just make my beats sound like real hip hop, not like something that's coming out of my goofy little keyboard that I had when I was a kid. And so I'm getting closer to that. But yeah, I saw Cypress Hill. I saw you guys I told you this the other day, but I saw you guys at the Opera House in Toronto in 1991 performing with Chub Rock. And that was amazing because that was kind of like, for me, I was probably 17 or 18 years old or something like that. And we're not from Toronto. We're from Ottawa, which is kind of smaller town, not really as much going on as Toronto. But we were down in Toronto recording a record, and we went to the Cypress Hill Chub Rock show. And man, I mean, that was a pretty exciting time, not just for music, but just for me personally, being a kid and I was just sort of discovering hip hop the last few years. I'd been listening to, Run DMC and Public Enemy, and then you guys came out, and it was explosive. And that was right when your record came out, and it was an explosive time for hip hop, and you guys changed the game, man. It was incredible to be there.
It was a fun time, man. I mean, if I remember that gig correctly, I think we were supporting Chub Rock. He was actually headlining the gig. Yeah. And it was a fucking crazy ass room of energy. Like, we were seeing this different type of energy that we used to see from going to the shows as fans and stuff like that. We started seeing, like when everybody would start jumping up. Remember that when that first came into the game? And early on when we were doing our shows, we saw this different energy where it was like hip hop, but there was like a punk rock and metal element to it, to where people just wanted to fucking go nuts. Yeah. And we were fans of that music before we got into hip hop. Like, I was a full on fucking metalhead before, I even knew what hip hop was. Run DMC were the ones that wrangled me in because, as you know, because we're probably roughly around the same age, they were like the first ones in hip hop that we knew of that were using rock guitars and live drums and shit like that, due to the fact that Rick Rubin was producing, stuff like that. And that wrangled me into hip hop. And I think it was sort of like we're giving off this vibe of where we came from, and it's all just going in a circle. You know what I mean? Like, we're hip hop fans and we're metalheads. And then when we got to doing our shows, we seen that energy in the crowd, and we didn't recognize it in the beginning. We just saw this weird energy happening, but what it turned into was amazing, because then, hip hop itself, like you had like groups like Wu-Tang come in, and Onyx and a bunch of raw groups like that come in and have that vibe and have that same sort of energy. It was like the beginning. I mean, we saw the beginning of that, and one of the earliest shows of that nature was that particular show. People were going fucking nuts in there.
Yeah, I think Toronto, they love hip hop in Toronto, and there was always sort of, I mean, now with Drake, it's sort of finally on the map, in a big way. But for years there was groups in Toronto. There was Maestro Fresh West back in the day when I was in high school. That came out. Let Your Backbone Slide. It was a huge hit in Canada, but it never. There was never really anything that really went international in a big way like Drake did. But it went way back to, like, there's breakdancing culture in Toronto, and I'm not from Toronto. We would go to Toronto. We were kind of excited to be in the energy of Toronto. And then when you have a big group like you guys were, a huge group from LA playing Toronto, I mean, people were just like totally, it was off the hook, because people were just excited to see you guys there. It was pretty cool. I remember the energy of that show. It was crazy. So yeah. But I like what we were talking about the other day about when you were telling me about, we were talking about Public Enemy.
Yeah.
I love the way that back when I heard their beats for the first time, I thought, okay, this is something completely different going on here, with the Bomb Squad, and the way all of a sudden it wasn't just like funk loops. It was, whoa, what's all this crazy sounds and stuff coming in and out. And then you had, Flav and Chuck kind of working off of each other. And I'd never really thought about it until you sort of mentioned it to me the other day about how you guys were kind of doing like reverse Chuck and Flav over Public Enemy style, gritty beats. I thought that was kind of interesting to I hadn't really thought of it like that. With you being the lead, higher pitched voice. First of all, when your record came out, like nobody had ever heard anyone rapping like that before either. Everyone always kind of rapped in the same tone, So it was awesome. And congratulations on the Walk of Fame, man. That's so cool.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, man. I mean, Public Enemy. I don't think there would be a us without them. Because we like. Run DMC and Public Enemy and BDP were the three in our rotation. There was more like EPMD and the Beastie Boys, most definitely, because if there was anybody I got compared to early on in terms of tone, it was, Mike D and Ad Rock. But my style was completely different than what they were doing. That was the only thing. So I didn't get a whole lot of comparisons after maybe the second album. People noticed my flow and cadence was different. I wasn't doing anything they were doing. It was just the tone that was sort of like, not necessarily similar, but in that register of high pitched, rapping and stuff like that. And as when we made the music, I don't think we planned for me being the lead. It just worked out that way, but that's what we did. We reverse engineered Public Enemy's like style of bouncing off each other back and forth like that, along with like what Run DMC was doing even before them. And, just the style of beats was slightly different, but it was inspired by, because we used to put bridges and breaks in Cypress Hill songs. And we still do that. But back then it was, a thing, because we thought, man, what Public Enemy was doing was setting the bar high. The Bomb Squad, their production was setting the bar so fucking high and so ahead of its time at that, that we felt like we got to be that good. Fuck everything else. That's what we got to be, as good as that. And that was a great source of inspiration, man. And, I salute to all of them brothers, man, because they were just ahead.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy too, is like, I mean, anybody who's younger watching right now probably can't even imagine what it was like before the internet. But especially today with how much we're on the internet and our phones all day. But there was something that was. I mean, you can't go back to that. We can never go back to that. But there was something that was just so much even more exciting about listening to music then, in some ways, because. Maybe it was because I was younger too, and you're a kid and you're discovering things. But music was the internet in a lot of ways. Like when I was growing up in Ottawa, if I wanted to know what it was like in California, I would have music and I would have Thrasher magazine, right, or Trans World Skateboarding magazine, because I was a skater. So that was it. You'd have photos in a magazine, and you'd have music. And I remember when I discovered. Rap music. It started with Sugar Hill Gang when I was really young, and you kind of were just amazed by the rhythm and the lyrics and the rapping and the beat and the bass line. Of course, that was amazing. But then when it started to, people started passing around tapes, and somebody gave me, hey, here, check out this tape. Boogie Down Productions, Criminal Minded. And I'm, The Bridge Is Over. And I'm like, I'm in high school. I'm going, and you're listening to it, and you don't have the internet. So you're kind of getting a glimpse into what it's like in New York. If you're, on the streets and you're like doing hip hop, and it's a whole different world from me growing up in the suburbs of Ottawa. And then when you guys came out, it was like, wow, now we're getting a glimpse into Los Angeles, totally different culture. You brought that whole vibe to the whole world for me for the first time, where I started really thinking about Los Angeles and that Cypress Hill, and you're going into this neighborhood in your mind. And it's incredible, man. I'm sure that's must have been something that people in LA must. I'm sure everyone knows that, but I don't know if people realize necessarily what it's like being in a place like Ottawa and in 1991 and listening to that in your headphones and being transported to a place that you don't have any idea what it's like other than what you see in the movies. And it's different than the movies. The movies like Colors would come out and we would sort of watch, Ice-T but it's different when it's a movie because it's so produced and you feel like it's a manufactured thing, even though it's a great movie, an incredible movie, right? But it's so produced, whereas hip hop, it's raw. You're just listening to you guys just talking right in your ear, and it puts LA on the map in a real way for people all over the world. So it's amazing. It's cool to talk to you, man. I'm excited to be able to get to know you through Zoom. We met a few times around town, but I remember years ago I met you at the House of Blues very briefly. But this is cool. I can't wait till this pandemic's over so I can actually come over to the studio and hang out in person. Yeah.
You were gonna ask something, right, Ezone?
Yeah, I got a question. It seemed like
Canada.
Yep. It's Yorkville, to be specific. I'm just playing, but it seems like your first dream was music. Like based on what you were saying, like it kind of like that's the first thing you dabbled in, like at first, just because you were a fan of hip hop and everything. How did you make that transition into like the comedy world? Because I heard stories that like you used to sneak into Yuck Yucks, which is kind of like the comedy store of like Toronto out there, and like
yeah,
I know that place is like legendary. But I'm like, how did you start dabbling into that world? Cause
I mean, it kind of started at the same time. I was in high school, and I started rapping in high school because I wanted to get up on stage at the talent show, and I couldn't play any musical instruments. So we just started making beats and getting up, and it was an excuse to get up on stage and be a goof, because I like being a goof. But then at the same time, I was going down to the comedy club, and I would go down to the comedy club, Yuck Yucks, and they would let us in, even though we were teenagers, 15, 16 years old, kind of different back then, And we would go to watch Canadian comics that like some of my favorite comics back then were Norm Macdonald, Harland Williams. They were just in Canada now. They've come down here and done amazing things. But it was kind of like a whole world. It was kind of in a lot of ways like stand-up comedy in general, rap music, skateboarding. There were these sort of three things that were just kind of controlling everything I did in my life was all about that. So, but we went down to, I remember we used to go down to Yuck Yucks and sit in the audience, and we go down to heckle actually, because we were assholes basically. Me and my three friends would go down and we'd sit in the front row like this, and we'd watch the comedian, and we'd have it timed out. So as soon as he'd tell his punchline, we'd all just quietly switch to the other hand, and distract him. And we were kind of just, attention-seeking kids. And we got kicked out of the comedy club, and we were banned from the comedy club. But
from Yuck Yucks?
In the very beginning, when I was 16 years old or 15 years old. But then I remember the right around when we got banned, we heard they had like open mic night, and I called. And you would call and you'd leave your name on an answering machine. And nobody did stand up in Ottawa back. There were like 10 people that did it. And so you could basically call and say, I'd like to try open mic night, and they'd put you up, right? So, but I left my name on the machine, and when I got there, Howard Wagman, who's still the owner of the club, who's still, I perform there all the time when I'm at home, and he saw me and he recognized me, and he said, he wasn't going to let me on stage because I was the one of the goofy kids that got kicked out the week before. But then the door guy who kicked us out, I guess while he was kicking us out the week before, there was a lot of like hilarious banter going on between my friends and him. We were kind of like just kind of razzing, and it was kind of funny. Like we're not like real assholes. We were just kind of having fun, And then he went and told him, he said, what? I think these guys might be kind of funny. Maybe you might want to let them try it. And so he even though we got kicked out the week before, he let us try stand up for the first time. And I had a pretty good a good set. My first time on stage, I did really good. And after the show, you know, after the set, it was like a 5-minute set. You know, Howard was like, "Hey, you know, you shouldn't come in the comedy club and be such an asshole because, you know, you're pretty good at that stand-up. You know, maybe you should come back next week." So I started coming back every week and stopped heckling.
The heckle culture is definitely present out in Toronto. Like, I know I've done everything. Like, I did West and East Side Little Comedy Store Room, and then Yuck Yuck as well. But it's that you guys definitely heckle, man. But it's not everybody. You guys do appreciate a good show. It's a whole different vibe out there. I'm glad I got my foot out there in Canada, because I would have hated to do it 2 minutes at a time in LA. You know?
Yeah. No, it's you know, I actually quit doing stand-up when I was 19 because my rap group got a record deal, and I decided, okay, I've got to focus. I'm going to be a rapper, I said. So I focused. You know, we got a deal with A&M Records in Canada. We were signed by the Dream Warriors.
Oh shit, the Dream Warriors?
Yeah, you know the Dream Warriors. They Be Real. They did some songs. It's a great group from Canada, and their manager Ivan Berry signed us to a record deal, and I had to cancel some stand-up gigs that I had, and I felt really bad about that. We went down to Toronto and we recorded this album, and the next 2 or 3 years we were just really doing that until we kind of lost our record deal, and then I went back to school and studied broadcasting and learned how to edit video, and kind of got back into video stuff and radio stuff. But I always loved making the beats and putting it all together. So it's a fun thing. I am going to send you those beats, Be Real, and I'll put a little rhyme at the beginning, and then I'll throw it to you, and then we'll just throw that out there, and we'll see what happens, man. Maybe we'll make some history.
I'm always ready. I got access to my studio. I can make it happen.
Yeah. That'd be cool. Yeah, I can send you some stems. I'll send you the stems on the internet. You know. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Such producer talk. I love it.
Yeah.
You were gonna ask something, see?
Yeah, man, I just wanted to give you props because, like, for me, when I first saw the Tom Green Show on MTV, that ushered in like a whole new style of comedy that was
absolutely
you were on the forefront of the next wave of, like, from sketch comedy, and you were doing like your rap songs that you know like that. It was so dope, and it really like set the precedent for the next wave of what we saw funny.
Yeah, I was like, I guess it was just kind of people hadn't really seen amateur content on television before, you know, like shot with a home video camera, getting chased by a security guard, you know, clearly not run through a network. And that came a lot from growing up listening to hip hop and from skateboarding videos for sure. And also just jumping onto technology. I mean, I really think I think like rap music really kind of in many ways is the reason why the Tom Green Show happened, because the way it went down was, you know, when I first heard rap music for the first time, I was listening to like the electronic beats, and I was thinking, how the hell are they making those beats? You know what? It's not a drum set. That's what's that 808 sound? What is that? And so, you know, you're 16, you start looking into it, and I realized that I could actually go get one of those drum machines. So I'd work my summer job and I'd get a drum machine. And when I got that drum machine, I was pretty much one of the only kids in my city with a drum machine, right? Like, you know, that was trying to make rap beats serious. Right. There was a couple others, but there wasn't a lot of people doing it. So I realized by jumping on technology before anyone else, I was figuring out things sort of before anyone else did. And so now, like, you know, we were the best at something because nobody else was doing it, right? Okay. It's easy to be the best at something when no one else is doing it. In Ottawa, of course, people were doing it all over, but not in Ottawa. So we stood out, and then that just got me thinking about technology a lot more. So when cameras changed, or, you know, video started changing, I always sort of paid a lot of attention to that. And that's why the Tom Green Show happened. You know, I realized, hey, cameras are changing. Nobody's using these yet the way that they could be used, because you'd look at television, you'd look at regular comedy on television, and you'd sort of sit back and you go like, it's funny, but it's not real. It's not really hit me in a real way. And the reason is because, comedy used to, it started out in TV studios back in the day when you needed giant lights in order to just see the image. So everything would have to get shot inside a studio. You couldn't just go down the street and talk to people. There'd be not enough light. And so that's why, all the sitcoms and the Saturday Night Live and all the shows, they're all shot in a studio. That's traditional comedy, right? And the writing is done in a traditional way. It's brilliant. I mean, it's arguably it's probably a hell of a lot better than how television has been ruined, essentially, in a lot of ways. But no, but
I agree.
Maybe you could say I ruined everything is what you could really kind of we're concluding right now. But so then you'd sort of. But as a kid, you'd look at it and go, "Hey, that doesn't really hit me in the gut the same way as when I watch Tony Hawk on and the Bones Brigade skating through San Francisco and Animal Chin
all day."
Yeah, like that doesn't hit me the same as something that has more real stuff happening. And the networks were, I think, a little afraid to do that at first because they had such a system. So I kind of wanted to really go in and just sort of like try to convince them to like stop running. So when we got to MTV, they had a bunch of writers. They gave me because I came in with my videos, and all of a sudden we had a bunch of writers and all really great guys and stuff. But now we're sitting in a room where we're trying to write things in advance, and then we would go out and to film. I'd already been doing the show for 5 years, but now we're going out to film in New York with an MTV crew, and it was an interesting kind of time because there was a lot of traditional TV sort of influences coming into it, and we kind of had to work it out and find a way to actually like kind of keep the raw flavor and still work with executive producers and writers and all of this stuff. And I think we found a good rhythm eventually, but it was a wild time because there was a lot of confusion, I think, at first when we got to MTV. I think they were a little confused by me.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you guys created the first hybrid show, like putting those old traditional TV style of production into the raw type of things that you were doing, and you guys influenced a lot of people with that. A lot of people asked me to ask you this, bro, because, they saw the Green Talks thing and they knew you were coming on here. They said, how in the world did you get Freddy Got Fingered green-lighted?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting, I ask myself that question sometimes, like probably every day before lunch, before I get out of bed in the morning. The poster's on the wall back there, by the way. If you see that, that's the poster on the wall for Freddy Got Fingered. It's funny because, it's amazing what happens when you've got a hit show. You sort of get a little bit more control over your choices. And I was kind of a naive kid, very naive kid, and I didn't really, things happened real fast when the show went on MTV for me. I just moved to New York, then to LA, all within a year, and then all of a sudden I had this hit show. And everybody was saying, hey, you want to be in this movie? You want to be in this movie? You want to be in this movie? And it's kind of like what I was talking about before. Like they were sending all these scripts and I would read them and I would get the same kind of feeling that I was talking about before, where it feels like, well, these are like movies that came out and were big movies, but I was reading them and I was like, well, this seems kind of very structured, Yeah. It didn't really seem funny to me, basically. And I had a lot of opportunity at that moment. And I guess, my friends and I that were working on the show, we just kind of were crazy, I guess. And I started saying no to all of these movies. Like I'd pass on this one. I'd pass on this one. They were offering me all these movies. And I had this, I really believed like, no, we got to and I still believe that I made the right decision. But I at the time I was really believed, no, I can't do those because those aren't like in keeping with sort of the kind of insanity that we're trying to express here. And so after I passed on a few movies, oh my God, think about it sometimes. the things I could have done. I ended up going to Fox New Regency, and I sat down with my friend Derek Harvey one night, who was writing on the show with me. And before we went there, and we just said, I keep turning down all these movies. Let's write one. And we just sat down every night while we were doing the show on MTV in New York. Every night we just sat down after a long day of shooting the show, and we'd stay in there till 2:00 in the morning. And we wrote this script in about 5 weeks, and sent it, and it was bought immediately. And we went to make the movie. Then when we went to make the movie, there's another layer of. By this point, I'd moved to LA when it was time to make the movie, and it was like 6 months later or something. But they said, okay, we're going to get a director for the movie, and so I started interviewing all of these directors, and we're the top directors in comedy in the world. They're all still the top director. I'm not going to name their names because I ended up saying I didn't want them to direct the movie, but they did all the Adam Sandler movies and all the big movies. Like, they're brilliant directors, right?
Right.
But like, I had all these things in the movie that are kind of insane things in the movie, and I'd sort of ask them like, okay, well, how are we going to make this look? Is this going to like? And then well, they'd be like, well, we can't really do that, But well, I mean. Like when I hit the deer, or when I give birth to the baby, right? Swinging it around by the umbilical cord, right? And then when I bite the umbilical cord at the end, and we got to have the blood squirting out of the umbilical cord, right? And he's like, well, we'll probably tone that down a little bit. And I just kept hearing all of these. Well, we'll probably maybe have to ease off a little bit on that. And so I went to the head of the studio, Arnon Milchan, who's a legend in film and has made so many movies, and just The Revenant, and going back to King of Comedy, and he's this sort of legendary guy. And I asked for a meeting with him, and I went in and I said, listen, I've always shot and edited my own stuff, and I know this is kind of would be a big leap of faith for you guys, but I wrote this movie, and this is what I want to do, and I want to make it the most insane movie ever. And he looked at me and said, okay, you can direct it. And so I went and directed it. And that's why all those little scenes in the movie are so completely outrageous, because there was like lots of moments, like when you make a movie, it's like Be Real. Anytime you do anything like with a video or anything, every little decision has to get looked at very carefully, or it gets sort of smoothed out, and the edges get taken off of it. So there were like scenes where, like there was a scene where, there's a deer at the side of the road. It's been hit by a car. Okay. My crazy character, okay, we'll call it a character, basically just crazy me, decides that I want to get inside this animal like Luke Skywalker did in Empire Strikes Back, just because he has it in his head that that's something that he wants to do. So in this moment, he cuts open the deer, right? Which is, a taxidermy deer, right? A prop deer. And at this point, the guts of the deer are supposed to squirt out onto the street, and I cover myself in the guts, and then I put it on like a coat, and I dance around, and I do a little dance, right? This is the idea. This is the idea that I'm trying to execute with the prop people. So you're a month out from shooting. The prop guy brings in the prop deer, and you look at it. Go, oh, that looks pretty real. It's a taxidermy deal. We're going to cut it open like this, and we're going to have a compressed air tank in the back of the deer, and then it's going to squirt the guts out. I go, well, let's test it out. So we test it out, and it squirts the guts out, and the guts come out are like these plastic, like it's like rubber, and they don't look like guts, Like, I know what guts look like. Those aren't guts. Those look like little rubbery, fake rubbery thing. And he's like, oh, well, you'll light it. And I'm like, no. I say, listen, go to the butcher, get a bag of pig's guts, jam it in that thing, and force it out with the compressed air. He's like, well, we can't do that. I go, why can't we do that? We can't do that. Let's just try it. So he goes and does it. It works. It looks disgusting, which is the way it is in the movie. Like, it looks completely disgusting. And to put it in perspective, we're shooting in the summer in Vancouver, a highway, And, guts in the summer, they're kept in a cooler, right? But as soon as it's time to shoot, they'd shove them all in front of the compressed air, and then we start shooting. Now I'm draped in pig's guts, and, it starts to rot pretty quick, man. So it was a wild day of shooting. I'm surprised I didn't get sick or something like that. But it's definitely a very crazy scene. And I think that kind of stuff goes through every scene in the movie. There's a scene at the end where a house falls on me, okay? An entire house falls on me, and I go through the window, like the old Buster Keaton bit, right?
Yeah.
We did that for real. Like the house really fell on me, and it was not CGI, and I really stood there, and an entire house fell on me, and I went through the glass, and there was glass in the window too. And the studio didn't want me to do it, but we did it for real. But so it was like lots of weird little details that I probably wouldn't have been able to do if we did it the normal way. And so the movie comes out. I know I'm talking too much. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much.
Please.
The movie comes out, and it did not meet with favorable reviews from the critics. Let's put it that way. I was made to feel by the sort of the mainstream reviewers that I had sort of committed some sort of a crime against cinema or something like that. But there was, the New York Times actually called it, said it was good. They called it brilliant, actually. One guy at the New York Times. Everybody else hated it. And it was really kind of a tough thing because I kind of thought that everybody was going to like it, to be honest with you. And then they really came down hard on me, and it was tough. But now, 20 years later, it's got this whole resurgence, and I think people found it outside of the hype of all, we're reviewing this today and telling you how you should spend your entertainment dollar, There's none of that. It's just people find it, and they go, what the fuck is this? And that's the whole point. And it's got this huge following now. It's probably, in fact, people bring up Freddy Got Fingered more than they even bring up the Tom Green Show now to me. It's this sort of like cult following thing that's really amazing. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool when you got a cult classic because people will always fuck with you at that point. Like they're just waiting for whatever the next shit is, no matter how long it might be, before they get the next one. They're just those type of fans that are waiting for it. Any kind of reboot, any kind of extension of that's the cool thing when you create something like that. And definitely it was, ahead of its time because people are more open to that type of shit. Like in this day and age, as sensitive as certain subjects are and certain humor is, as a comedian, which it's probably harder, to make fun of certain shit these days than it was back then. But still, there are those people that look for that right now, and that's how it becomes a fucking cult classic. But it's great because back then, you're right, there was a lot of people that were just not open to shit. They were just, one way of thinking, and if you broke tradition in any way, the scrutiny and all the shit talk and everything that goes with it.
Yeah. And you know what day that Freddy Got Fingered came out? 4/20.
4/20.
Nice.
Hey, what were some of the ones you turned down, if you could mention like 3?
Well, I mean, it's not like I'm, it's nothing against the movie or anything like that. There was a movie called Saving Silverman that I was asked to do, and I did Freddy Got Fingered instead. I would have been in a movie with Jack Black. It would have been me and Jack Black in a movie together, which would have been awesome. And so I didn't do that.
What's his face? American Pie, right?
Yeah. Jason Biggs and Steve Zahn, I think, was in it as well. And I basically did Freddy Got Fingered instead of that one, which was the one they were really pushing. There were some other movies that might not have gotten made that they wanted to make. There was a remake of a film, a Roberto Benigni film called The Monster, which they wanted to do, which I sometimes think, man, that would have been an amazing movie to have gotten to make, But there was, it was one of those weird times, where, I didn't know how Hollywood works. I didn't know anything. I had I was just kind of here and I kind of wish in hindsight I could have just sort of agreed to do everything and then sort of tried to find a way to make it all work. But, you know, you can't second guess yourself. You know, that's the thing when you get older, like, you know, as you know, I'm older now. And I went through a period of time in my 30s, you know, where I spent a lot of time kind of looking back and thinking, like, you know, regretting things. And it was really starting to kind of, you know, mess with me, you know, like mess with my positive energy in a big way, you know, in a really big way. And I was doing my web show and I was probably drinking too much. I still drink, but I was probably drinking like too much, you know, and it was just kind of like I was not in a great place. And, you know, I spent a lot of time thinking about all the little things that, oh, I did that wrong. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. And then you start to realize now I'm 48 years old and, you know, I mean, shit, there's just so much less of my life ahead of me to ruin. I don't really want to ruin it, you know, by sitting around worrying about something that happened 20 years ago. So, you know, it's, I'm actually look back at, and, you know, people talk about this all the time about, you know, embracing failure. And I look back at anything that didn't work or wasn't successful or wasn't well received, and I now look at it and I go, man, like that actually kind of makes you who you are. You know, anything, even mistakes that you wish you could go back and change them. Or I even had cancer, right? So I had cancer while all that was going on too. So, you know, I go like, man, you know, sometimes I think, you know, I had testicular cancer. Okay. They took my right testicle, still have the left one. It's the middle one now. I'm doing good. Yeah. But, you know, and so you go, man, like, you know, I actually kind of sometimes think that it's crazy to say, but sometimes I think I'm kind of glad that happened to me because it like totally changed my whole perspective on the world. You know, like just having to fight cancer when I was 28 years old in the middle of all that stuff. That's why my show on MTV stopped. My show stopped because I got cancer. I had to quit the show. Then I went and made the movies and you know, a year later or whatever. But, you know, I kind of go like, you know, how am I dealing with this pandemic right now? You know, where, you know, some people could sit around and, you know, feel sorry for themselves because, you know, I had to cancel my tour. You know, meanwhile, there's people are out of work. The entire economy's crashed. People are dying. You know, like people are sick all over the world. You know, you can't sit there and feel sorry for yourself because, you know, I can't go out and tell jokes, you know, and so I kind of feel like maybe going through cancer, going through some failure in the past, disappointment in the past, prepares you for these kinds of things in life when you're older, where you go, damn, like this is, you know, yeah, I just got to sit at home and watch Netflix and you know, eat food all day, you know, and hang out, you know. I mean, I can't be pissed off about this, you know. This is, you know, I'm more worried about everyone else who's out there suffering, you know. Yeah,
it sounds like, you know, the adversity you had to go through gave you some perspective to look at things different in terms of not letting the shit in the past stress you out. There's bigger things to worry about, and, you know, really the worst thing that you could do is stress, because that causes, you know, a lot of health problems and stuff like that. It's better just to, you know, take a breath, find your breath, and, you know, let the shit roll off. You know, forgive yourself. Not you per se. I'm saying just anyone, you know, feeling that type of pressure on themselves for, like, you know, when you fail, when you fall off and stuff like that. Because, you know, if you can get back up, that it's like you said, it makes you stronger. So when you're dealing with situations that we're in now, it's like nothing. You could deal with this because you've dealt with harder things, you know?
Yeah, I was mentioning this to you the other day when we were talking, you know, what I think is, you know, so when you got your Hollywood star, you know, I was watching you guys get that, and, you know, so happy for you guys. And, you know, honestly, it should have happened, years ago, right? You know, LA, you know, owes you a huge debt, right? For you know, putting a big part of LA culture on the map, you know, and so, but when I saw that, I was just thinking, like, you know, thinking about all the groups that I listened to back in the day, and most of them aren't really doing it anymore. There are some, and that's incredible, but most aren't. And, you know, how do you persevere like that? I mean, I would like to ask you that. How do you persevere like that through the times when, you know, you have a hit record and then, you know, and then you go through years where you go, okay, music changes and style changes. How do you just keep that energy up and keep that focus and that drive up?
I think it's still having like a love and passion for it. You know, first and foremost, that has to be there, is the love for what you're doing, and the love drives the passion, right? And you know, to be around so long, I mean, it's tough because, you know, hip hop music in general evolves, but you know, we've been fortunate to have that cult-like fan base that has been there since day one to now, and we've managed to grow that out, and I believe that's for a couple of reasons. You know, consistency and always being there, right? So even if we didn't have a new album coming out, we'd be on a tour, on a festival, at a show or something, constantly trying to win people over with the music, but you know, through the live format and stuff like that. And in terms of putting out albums, you know, we had a great run when, you know, in the peak of our career and stuff like that. So, you know, we made a connection with fans and people that helped us extend beyond, you know, having a hit record. If we had something good in the market, regardless if it sold 1 million records or not, or it got 10 million streams or not, that there was always like a good quality product out there by us to stand up on its own without all the bells and whistles. Like, you know, when you're with when you're with the major label, you have all these different resources. So you have a marketing team that creates the campaign for the marketing and promoting of your brand and stuff like that. So you're always in people's eyes and ears. So, because, you know, while you're with them and while you're selling records with them, they want to promote you everywhere to everybody and, you know, to make you a name, right? So it's up to you and the work you put in on how long that name carries on. And for us, we were always competitive, along with that passion and love for what we do in music. We're always competitive. We looked at it like, you know, we attributed to like basketball or equated to basketball. Every year, this particular franchise is going for the championship. They may not win it, but they're always in the race. I
love that.
That's how we looked at it. And a lot of fans, you know, stood by us in that mentality. And we gained new fans and stuff like that in the process. And I think the ability to be ourselves in 3 different decades.
Yeah.
Instead of like, you know, like following trends of music and shit like that, we always carved our own path, whether it was popular or not. But it always managed to link in the time of when we put it out. And I think it's those few things that helped us, you know, keep here. And then just being cool with our fucking fans, like engaging, interacting, and making ourselves available and not off-putting.
Yeah, yeah.
Although sometimes, you know, as any artist, you can get caught on a bad day.
Yeah, sure.
That happened, you know?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you must have a million crazy stories from back in the day, you know, in the hip hop, world in LA. And, you know, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what stories you must have about other artists you've, you know, hung with and worked with. And is it crazy sometimes that you think about like being there sort of at the beginning stages of hip hop music?
Well,
West Coast hip hop music sort of kind of came sort of slightly on the right after, you know, during that whole Tupac and you must have known Tupac, I'm sure, and that whole tragedy. I mean, were you involved or around at that time or with those guys?
Like throughout my career and stuff like that, and getting to know some of those guys, I never imagined I'd be in a lot of those situations with some of the people from my time that still do music now.
Yeah.
And some before us, you know, like hanging out with them and getting to know them. And, you know, definitely never saw that because as an artist, you're wrapped up in your music and not who you might meet. You want to be in the categories with them. You want to be in their league or whatever. So you're not necessarily thinking that you're gonna, be friends with any of them. You're just thinking, I want my music out in the world, right? At least that's what it used to be back then. What it is now, I can't say.
Yeah.
I make music because I love it. But back then it was like, you didn't anticipate becoming friends with a lot of these dudes and then meeting some of your idols and actually doing work with some of them and whatnot. So it was pretty surreal, but like in those moments it was exciting because we all knew like that all the guys that we were hanging out with and that were hanging out with us, we all knew that we had something special in that time of music, and we bonded through that, and a lot of us still communicate to this day, even though maybe some of our career paths went off in different places and stuff like that. But it was a magical time, really, man. You don't see as much of it like back then as now. I mean, you see it here and there, but not quite like then. But it was a trippy time, man. I mean, we did a lot of crazy things. One of those crazy times was we were all hanging out at a Daytona spring break for MTV, and we were playing it, and a lot of hip hop artists were there, like Busta Rhymes was there, and I think this is right when he was starting to do his own thing away from Leaders of the New School. It was, or maybe right before that. Black Sheep was there. I believe who else was there? Naughty by Nature was there. Salt and Pep were there.
Yeah.
And there was one day, and Mark Wahlberg was there. He was out there. This is when he was. He was doing.
Were the Funky Bunch there as well?
With the Funky Bunch, bro.
With the Funky Bunch.
Were my bros, man. I got to tell you, they were cool as fuck. But so we were. Sure. We were in Daytona, and we were in my hotel room, I think, and we were shooting dice in my hotel room. Tretch, myself, and I think Busta Rhymes was there, and a few other rappers. I mean, there was a bunch of us in my room just shooting dice as rappers did back in those times, right?
Yeah.
CeeLo was the game, the East Coast version of throwing dice, right?
Yeah.
And Salt and Pep rolled up in the room, and this is when Pep and Tretch are they're dating, they were barely starting to date and all that stuff, whatever. And she comes in the room, she goes, "This is what y'all are doing? Y'all are throwing dice?" Said, "I just did a bungee jump. What y'all gangster rappers are doing?" and Tretch and I looked at each other, we're like, "I'll do it if you do it. I'll do it if you do it."
Yeah.
And so he pretty much, manipulated the situation, got us down there to do bungee jumps, right? So I'm afraid of heights at this point. You know what I mean? Like I was always afraid of heights at that point in my life. I was scared shitless, right? And I thought Tretch was going to back down. But before I know it, this guy's up there jumping the fuck off. I'm like, oh man, now I really have to do it. Right?
Yeah, he didn't want to wuss out in front of his girl, right?
Yeah, no. And then this writer for The Source named Dream Hampton, she runs in front of me. So she gave me a little bit of extra time to take a couple breaths before going up there, because this was like at a 250-foot crane.
Yeah.
On the top that you're jumping from, right? Onto the air mattress on Daytona Beach. So Dream goes on, she jumps in. And then, so I have to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I go up, and it was the trippiest thing. You could see far as fuck out as the eye could see from up there. I was tripping, and the guy goes, "Hey, this is your first time, right?" I said, "Hell yeah, it's my first time." He says, "Take 3 deep breaths and fall forward."
Yeah.
So I did that, and I start, like, when I bounced the third time, I start spinning in circles while I'm upside down. It was the worst part of it. Wow. All the other shit was fun. Like, I cured my fear of heights by doing that. But what was fucked up is that as a kid, I never liked doing the spins. You know what I mean? So I was spinning upside down, blood rushing to my head. It felt like I had like a 12 pack of malt liquor to the head.
Yeah.
And that was the crazy shit. So just when we thought, you know, we like did something like, yeah, we did what you did, Pep. We look up and she's jumping off the crane backwards. You know,
right.
We're like, no, I'm not going up.
Man.
Twice. But that was one of the crazy stories I remember right there.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool that there was like that. Yeah, because it must have been it's a unique time, right? Because the music it was kind of a interesting time for hip hop because it was kind of like a second wave of hip hop, right? Would you say like, or, you know, like it was like it was a new, like you said, leaders of the new school. It was the new school. Now it sounds like old school, but you know, but at the time it was kind of like, it was changing. It was starting to change for the first time. And people were probably starting to say, oh, this rap music's not just a fad. You know, it's not just a thing that's going to disappear entirely. It's evolving, changing. You guys were all there doing that together. That must have been a crazy time to be around all that. Yeah.
It was fun, man. And that type of shit, when we hung out and did things as like a group, even though we were from different groups, you know, it bonded us. You know, we're all friends to this day. I mean, I remember coming off of that shit and I guess I looked pretty green, like I was going to toss my cookies or something. And, you know, Busta Rhyme comes over, he goes, yo, you okay, son? Yeah, did you sit down right here for a second? But that, you know, like it's a trip, you know. But we all became friends, and we had many events like that. I mean, we didn't always bungee jump or do crazy shit like that, but we're always hanging out at the new music seminars and the music conventions that used to jump off in the 90s and stuff like that. I think, you know, that bonded a lot of the hip hop artists back then. I think, you know, whether you were from West Coast, East Coast, and from the South, you know, those events right there would allow us to sort of network together, and you don't see much of that anymore because those seminars are gone. But
yeah, things got a little rough there for a minute between the West Coast and the East Coast, though. I mean, was there a period of time where you know, you wouldn't have been able to go bungee jumping with a rapper from the East Coast, or?
No, never, man. It would have always been easy work, man. I think that the media had more to do to the beefs. I mean, there was a couple artists, that had problems. Obviously, we know. They've talked about it for many years, but I remember shit. You know, Wu-Tang and Onyx and a few others. In that time, when all that shit was jumping off, they'd come down here and rock shows, and people loved them. And same thing with a lot of close artists. And, you know, and on the flip side, guys like, you know, or groups like ourselves and the Far Side and other West Coast groups would go down there to New York and flip it out too.
That's amazing how the media can do something like that. You know, like how, you know, there's a beef between two particular artists or a few people, and then they make it about the entire country and entire West Coast versus the East Coast. I mean, you know, there's a period there where people, you know, kids, right, were trying to think, do I have to decide what music I listen to? You know, am I not able to listen? Do I have to only listen to music from New York or only listen to music from LA, which is, you know, bullshit, you know?
Yeah. You know, music is universal, just like comedy. It's universal. It's meant for whoever can, it relates to, that can connect to it or find something in it. You know what I mean? And music and comedy are very much similar in that sense because they're both expressive forms of art. You know, one's to make you dance and think, and one's to make you think and laugh. You know, based off of situations, right?
And I think rap and stand-up are also like another, you know, a parallel that you don't hear talked about as much, but music and comedy is like a major one, but then rap and stand-up is very similar actually. Because when I'm doing stand-up, right, I'm on stage, I'm holding the mic, I'm like, I talk fast. I got a rhythm in my stand-up when I'm doing stand-up, And, you know, it's kind of like, I feel like I got a beat going.
It is.
In the back of my mind, you know, and I think a lot of stand-ups who are, you know, really good stand-ups have like Bill Burr's a drummer, Andrew Dice Clay is a drummer. They have that rhythm going on in their head. You know, the crowd can't hear it, but it's there. And I kind of feel like rapping and stand-up are almost like the same thing. You know, I want to do this thing. I haven't. What's that?
I said, is that why you freestyle?
Freestyle?
Yeah, like I was like, you know how you said that you do it when you have a beat. I was like, so I figured, I'm like, is that why you freestyle too? Because I heard and I've seen that you do freestyle as well too.
You know, I kind of want to do this thing in my stand-up, which is something that I haven't figured out how to do yet. But I want my joke to start without anybody realizing it or noticing it right away. I want them to just start rhyming, and then I want to keep going, and then I want to get louder, and then I want a beat to drop without ever even saying that I was going to start rapping. So if I'm just talking and telling a joke, and then all of a sudden, you know, I'm having a smoke, and then all of a sudden that's all she wrote, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, what's the quote? And then all of a sudden I'm like flipping it like this, I'm ripping it like that. I'm flipping a bit like this, and I'm ripping a bit like that, and I'm talking a bit like this, and now I'm rocking a bit like that. I'm on the microphone, and this beat is kind of fucking fat. I'm here with Be Real, keeping it real. What's the deal? Rocking on the microphone, mass appeal. I kick it like this, I kick it like that. You know, but you know, just kind of like, you know, but there'll be punchlines in it too, not just a bunch of garbage like I just said there.
That would be dope, though. That's not something anybody's doing, and that's something I think it's innate because you've been doing it for so long, whether people know that or not.
Yeah,
you've been, you know, connecting with music the way you do on a different level, you know, because a lot of the older comedians.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of.
You're more in the now, you know, producing beats and shit like that. It's a totally different get down, and I think that would be fucking awesome.
Yeah, that would be a
it's
and the point you made that stand up is like rap. I believe that to be very true because I mean you guys got to you know within like let's just say an hour set, right, or a 30-minute set, you guys have to put all these bits together that flow.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with when we're putting a set list together for a show. All the songs got to flow, they got to hit, and you have to remember that shit.
Yeah,
you know it's
I feel like jokes are kind of like songs, you know, like because you'll tell jokes for years, you know, and you keep changing them. You know, it's they're just kind of like I see them like as little chunks of information that you kind of reorganize in your head, and sometimes you do them in a different order, and sometimes you even add some different words or change some different things. But it's definitely you know, another thing, you know, rapping, you know, you can do it just by yourself, right? You don't need a band, you know. It's nice to have music, but you know, you can just, you know, go with the two turntables and a microphone thing, you know. It's sort of like stand up, you know. A lot of bands that tour are always talking about, you know, must be kind of nice to do stand up where you just go get on a plane and go off by yourself, and you know, you don't even need to bring anything, you know. I bring like, you know, a couple of pairs of socks in my backpack and I'm pretty much good, you know.
Hey, are you feeling like you're going to make an album of this?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm recording lots of music, so I'm gonna probably just start. I think what I'm doing really is just for fun. I'm gonna put it out on the internet and maybe make some fun videos while I'm in quarantine here and put them up on my YouTube channel and you know, I'm gonna send you that smash that I'm working on, and you know, that you know,
I'm ready.
We're gonna put it together and it'll be a fucking smash. You know? No, I'm just kind of taking it like it's just kind of something. I got a lot of time right now to play with these beats, and I'm gonna just start sending them around to my friends and see what happens. You know.
You should make an album, bro.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna put something out for sure. I'll send you some stuff to listen to, and you can give me some advice.
I'm ready. I'll be there.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Dope.
Thank you for taking the time for doing the Dr. Greenthumb podcast. Now I definitely got to do yours next.
Yeah, man.
1 here ratio. I got to even it out for you here. And
yeah, I appreciate it.
Man, I thank you, and I wish you well in this time of quarantine.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for your next shit, bro.
Yeah. Thanks, Be Real, man. I appreciate it. That's amazing. And, all the best to you and your family and everyone here and all your friends and your fans, and be safe. I know it's a scary time right now we're in, but, let's just kind of try to chill and get through this, and we'll be back to rapping and telling jokes soon enough.
Yeah, we'll get you down here in in the smoke box or the studio at some point.
Yeah, man. Sounds dope. All right, appreciate it.
Right on.
Thank you.
So, you guys got any shout outs, C-?
Follow me on all the social media, C-Fan4 at Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, and Mixcloud under DJ C-.
E-Zone.
Shout out to everybody who keeps continuously buying the merch on the website at highandhungry.shop. There's a new episode of High and Hungry dropping this week, so make sure you look out for that. We're still practicing, social distancing and stuff. And yeah, like Tom said, we'll be back to telling jokes and making music no time.
Right on.
Yeah.
I second that. I agree. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Stay home. Stay safe. And we'll see you next week. Thanks to my man, Tom Green. We'll be see you soon. Word up. Peace.